No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome to Revenge of the Birds Radio. This is your host, Jess Root, as this is the first official show looking at the offseason. We are done with the 2014 season. It is wrapped up. It's been put in a box, put away, and we can have fond memories and disappointments. But tonight we're going to talk about the Arizona Cardinals offseason and some of the pressing issues that are moving forward. But what's going on in the world of the Arizona Cardinals right now? It's pretty much about two things. About Todd Bowles, defensive coordinator Todd Bowles, who, if you are listening live, of course, as of Tuesday night, defensive coordinator Todd Bowles is whining and dining with the New York Jets brass out in New Jersey. He's out in New York. He's having dinner with them. It appears that contract talks have not yet begun, but things look like they are moving forward. It is kind of the thing that you expect to see before an announcement of a contract or agreement is being made. He was out to dinner tonight. He met with them earlier. Was their second interview with the Jets, and he is set to meet with them in the morning again. Now, he was originally scheduled to meet Wednesday with the Atlanta Falcons, where it was also believed that he was probably the favorite to get that job, but it looks like at least unless contract talks now. Todd Bowles can be picky with his jobs as he's getting paid. He's currently under contract here with the Cardinals for $2 million a year. So we'll see how that goes, but it certainly has the appearance that the Arizona Cardinals will be saying goodbye to Todd Bowles and his defense as we move forward. So we're going to talk to tonight's show, the Revenge of the Birds radio show, as we have it each week during the season and then periodic through the off season. It is always brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's leading audio content provider, where you can sign up today. Audible.com. You can sign up, test the service out for a month, get yourself a free audiobook download, and give it a test drive. You can do that by going for Revenge of the Birds radio's listeners. The code is, you go to audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. It's audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. And take advantage of that great service. We've got Seth Cox on the line. Seth is just joining me as he does for most of our shows, truly, our regular. And welcome on, Seth. How are you tonight?
Good, Jeff. How are you?
Pretty good. So I understand we're not quite using the next man up mentality because we really don't have a next man up. It's either you or nobody else. We got you to stick it out. As you got to stick it out. Yeah, got to gut it out for your team here for this podcast tonight while you're getting over some bronchitis, which is kind of hard to do. So don't lose the voice. It makes podcasting kind of hard.
I'll be all right. I got my hot tea right here, so I'll be ready to go.
Good stuff. So how are you tonight? How are things going?
Good. Just busy trying to get into these prospects to get ready for the draft.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about. I don't know if this will be a longer show than normal, but it's certainly, we can go a little more in depth. We don't have any games to talk about, good and bad, but we certainly have our share of things to talk about is the most pressing things of the offseason. And for tonight, listeners, if by chance you want to give us a call in, for the three of you that I think that sometimes listen live to the show, you can give us a call at 646-478-3787 to join us live on Revenge of the Birds Radio and give us your comments, your questions, or naturally, most of you are listening to this show after the fact. Many of you via RevengeOfTheBirds.com are great readers. And those of you who are listening via Stitcher Radio, iTunes, or Blog Talk Radio's interface itself on the internet, join us. Head on over to revengeoftheBirds.com. You will find no better group of Arizona Cardinals fans. You will find what I would hope that you would find is great content on the Cardinals and then the NFL to some extent as well. But we're gonna talk about, listeners, we're gonna be talking about in this episode. This is not the free agent show, so we're not gonna preview free agency. We're gonna touch a little bit on free agency, but it's more about who's on the Cardinals right now and who might or might not be on the Cardinals once the new league year rolls around. I don't know how often we're going to have a show during the offseason. It'll kind of be probably won't be every week as there's not much going on. We will definitely have a free agency preview. Who could be the cuts, who are some targets. After free agency starts, we'll probably talk about the moves. We'll have a couple of shows about the draft that I know that's really gearing up for the draft. This is your busy time of year, is it not?
Yeah, this is when it gets a little busy.
and as it should be, and I'm going to lean on you a lot because you are much more the draft guru than I am. I'm more of the talking head, the pencil pusher, the guy behind the website, and I kind of put the content out there. But it's because of guys like Seth and other guys that help me out for sharing that. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the pressing issues. We're going to talk about Todd Bowles. What do we do? What do the Cardinals do if Todd Bowles leaves? What direction do they go in? Do they go in-house? Do they go outside of the organization? Do they bring in Dick LeBeau? What coaches will remain? What coaches could leave with Bowles? We're going to talk about as well. We'll get into the Larry Fitzgerald contract, of course. What to do with him? What's the likelihood that he'll be around next season? Other contracts: Darnell, Dockett, Lyle, Sendlein. Of course, the Daryl Washington situation, and we'll just kind of look at the potential free agents the Cardinals have, and which of those players should return. So let's go ahead and get this started, Seth. Let's talk about Todd Bowles. Before the show went on, there was a little less certainty. But it really appears right now that I would be surprised if he leaves New York without a contract with the Jets. And if that happens, did you see that happening, that Bowles landing with the Jets?
No, I mean, I texted you, I think, the week before the season ended or the last week of the regular season ended or sometime. I don't remember when, but I texted you and I said, I heard that Bowles was going to be really picky, and that kind of came to fruition. You saw with the Bears, sounds like he turned down a second interview. He turned down interviews with the Bills and the Raiders. And I also said that everybody that I had talked to said two jobs that he really liked were Atlanta and San Francisco. I frankly didn't even know the Jets were in play. From their end, actually, it makes less sense. I mean, from Bowles' end, I can kind of see it because he is inheriting a defense that's kind of pre-made to his strengths. But, he's kind of going from a situation where what the Cardinals had for most of this year when they didn't have Carson Palmer, where they're going to be leaning on the defense and trying to figure out if Geno Smith's good enough to be the quarterback. And I find that odd. But maybe he was more interested in going to a team with a talented defense than a talented offense that needed to rebuild the defense in Atlanta. But I thought for sure Atlanta would have been the spot to go for him.
And it may still be. He may leave town without a deal, and he may go to Atlanta and kind of have two deals on the table. The Jets did cancel their other interview that they had scheduled. So, I mean, it's possible. It does get that. If you look at it from an NFL perspective, that'll be a fun division to see. You got Bill Belichick. You've still got Rex Ryan, who just went, he went up the freeway a bit. Now he's headed over to Buffalo. And potentially Todd Bowles. Now, he isn't nearly the character, but that would be, I mean, when you come to Belichick's a defensive guy, Rex Ryan, defensive guy, Todd Bowles, defensive guy, that's quite the division you've got there with the personalities and the reputation that you have for that. That could be a really, really bruising division, especially in the years ahead. As guess what, Tom Brady's not going to play forever. We don't know how much he's got. Do you see the Jets could he even have success there? I mean, obviously it comes down to the quarterback position. If I recall, you were a pretty big Geno supporter. Was I right? I think I remember that. You were big on Geno Smith?
I thought Geno was a really good quarterback prospect. So, and maybe he still will be. Maybe getting out of the Marty Morningwig umbrella, and I mean Bowles. I don't know if he's going to bring Kitchens to New York. I don't know where he's going. OC wise there, but it's interesting because I think what it shows you is that he's not looking for the easiest path, which I think Atlanta was, because you just kind of look at that division and how big of a mess it is, and he could have gone there, and if he was able to get the defense in order, there's no reason that team wouldn't have been the best team in the division. So I think going to New York shows that he's kind of up for a challenge, because it's not a complete rebuild unless they draft a quarterback, in which case then it is obviously a complete rebuild, and they're going to look to, maybe that's what his thought was going into New York with a new GM and a new kind of regime. He would get 3 years instead of, going to Atlanta, where Pioli and Dimitrov, if they don't win right away, could be out next year, or at worst the year after. And so maybe that played into and it's not official yet, but maybe that will be part of what played into the decision.
You still there, Seth? Seems like I don't know if it's the internet connection or if you're still there. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. I couldn't tell that I was. I think the connection for the listeners when they're listening to the show will be fine, but I wasn't getting much there. The New York job also has kind of the perk of that real high draft pick. It probably doesn't look like that one of the top that either Winston or Mariota will be available at number 6. However, the potential being close enough that maybe, say, Tennessee doesn't want to draft a quarterback because they're sold on Zach Mettenberger, that the Jets potentially could trade up, and it wouldn't, even if he's not sold on Geno Smith, they're still in a position they can make a move up and get the quarterback that they want, that'd be fun. And I can see why Todd Bowles would be attracted to that. Maybe he just, and simply is, maybe it's simply a put that they are putting together, especially if the Jets kind of came out of nowhere. Maybe simply a case that he blew him out. He blew him out of the water. Just impressed him to no end. After all, I mean, we've seen him impress other teams. When he interviewed for the defensive coordinator job with the Cardinals prior to Ray Horton getting the job, Ken Whisenhunt came out of that interview quite impressed with Horton. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I hope he has success. If there's one thing, and being that if he goes to an AFC team, he can have all the success he wants, and the only way that's going to affect us is really if we meet in the Super Bowl, and that'd be totally fine with the Bruce Arians, Todd Bowles Super Bowl matchup. That'd be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get him out. Obviously, you didn't want him in San Francisco, and so getting him out of the NFC is even a better thing. So you're gonna see. I guess we'll see what happens with the. I think they have the 6th pick in the draft, and how that's gonna play out. They have some talent, but wow, I'm still a little surprised if it does come to fruition.
Now let's look at the Cardinal side of things. Obviously, it looks like to me. I don't think there's any chance now Bowles returns. I think it's pretty much a done deal, which makes a couple of things, at least timing-wise, quite interesting. Dick LeBeau resigns from the Steelers, makes it very clear that he's not retiring, that he intends on continuing his career. The timing is odd because, well, he's got a relationship with Arians. They coached together in Pittsburgh for many years. The Cardinals wanted LeBeau back in the Whisenhunt days, weren't able to pry him away. They also wanted Keith Butler, who has now been announced as the defensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. And a lot of the local media here, and trusting them, they kind of poo-pooed at the idea of LeBeau coming over as the defensive coordinator should Todd Bowles leave. Then the report came out that Arians and LeBeau did in fact speak about a spot on the staff. And I don't know if LeBeau would be looking for something more advisory like Tom Pratt or Tom Moore to be kind of the old guy over the new guard. But now I wouldn't be surprised to see LeBeau join the group. Now, Cardinals kind of have on staff, they've got some guys who are pretty well respected. Caldwell, he could be promoted from internally. Nick Rapone, he's a guy who Arians got out of the college ranks. He was a defensive coordinator there, so he's got the experience there. Of course, you got LeBeau. Who is it? First of all, give me your thoughts on LeBeau as a potential DC here, as an advisor, what he would be on the staff, because I don't think he'd be a position coach. He'd be the defensive coordinator or some senior assistant with some fancy pants name. And if not LeBeau, would it be someone internally? Is there anyone outside that has ties to Arians that hasn't really been talked about that could be brought in?
I kind of went through it today, and I was just looking at just names that could even make sense. And I mean, Arians has been around so long, so I mean, theoretically, he's probably crossed paths with almost anybody, almost everybody in the NFL. But you look at it, I think Rapone and Caldwell were the guys that you and I have talked about, off the air. And then the LeBeau thing is interesting in a couple of ways. I think, if he, tells Arians, hey, I want to be the DC for, at least a year, like co-defensive coordinator, call the games and have Rapone or Caldwell, kind of be the guys down on the field. You could see something like that for a year or two while he mentors those guys into how to call games and stuff like that. But I think the special assistant or advisor or whatever role he wants, I think just having him on the roster is important in the fact that you'll see, it's going to be a first-year DC if they go from within, even though Rapone has been a DC in college. I mean, it'll be a first-year NFL DC. So having a guy like LeBeau that he can lean on, or, even LeBeau can kind of throw him information as needed, I think that's an important thing. So I think just getting him to the roster, or not the roster, but the coaching staff is, what really matters.
Yeah, I agree. I like the thought of bringing LeBeau. In fact, I have no problem with him even being. Oh, and there it is. I just saw on Twitter, Ian Rappaport are hiring Todd Bowles as their head coach per source. We broke it. No one's listening, but we broke the news on the radio. Todd Bowles is now going to be the head coach of the New York Jets. Goodbye, Todd Bowles. We love you. We're sorry that we didn't win the championship and enjoy the East Coast, but it is. Now it's official. Well, official-ish. Todd Bowles is gone.
I've said it on Twitter the last couple days, or maybe even over the last week. I thought Bowles did the best job of any defensive coordinator this year in the NFL. I know Terrell Austin, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but is another hot name, and he did a great job. But that talent on the Lions defense, just on the roster depth chart, however you want to look at it, that's more than what the Cardinals have on their side. So it's what he did, what he was able to do for 13 weeks, I thought was special, and I think that kind of is why he was so coveted by so many people.
And it's really kind of interesting is the fact that you look at what he did, and you can tell the respect he has around the league, because Ray Horton, who did equally impressive, now not quite as impressive because of the injuries the Cardinals had, but you look at what Ray Horton did, and he was a really hot candidate, and he just kind of fell off the map. Whatever it was, whether it was demeanor, maybe what, I don't know what it is, but because Horton and Todd Bowles are two very different personalities, very similar in defensive approaches, but Todd Bowles, who is, if you have to look at a demeanor, look at Tony Dungy, look at Lovie Smith. Those are the type of guys, and who are two coaches who had extreme success in the NFL, who's got a reputation as being very, very intelligent, very good teacher, very good communicator. That's a guy that you're going to want to have your team. So it's just coming across right now. If you're listening to the show via download at this point, you knew the nose has already happened. So let's talk about the potential thing. So we've got Rapone, you've got Caldwell. Is there anyone outside of the Cardinals organization that the Cardinals should consider? Some of the radio guys around here, even Matt Barrows over in Northern California, such as perhaps Vic Fangio for the DC for San Francisco. Is there anyone that you think would fit with Arians, just based on who's out there in the league? Obviously, it could be a guy from the college ranks. It could be a position coach somewhere. Is there anyone out there you think would be a good match?
I think Fangio would be a great match, just because of the experience and within the division. He's had so much success, against Russell Wilson and obviously against the Rams, and he's had success against the Cardinals. So that's a good thing, and he probably knows Cap pretty well, and that's another plus. He was the DC of a team that went to 3 NFC Championship games, so I'll be okay with that. I don't think that's going to happen, though.
I don't mind. I like the thought there as well, especially because I get the feeling that I get the impression, even though Arians has never come out to say that Arians is a 3-4 guy. I get that's why he hired Bowles. He's talking to LeBeau. Those are traditional 3-4 guys, with Bowles a little more flexible, but LeBeau is definitely 3-4, no question about that. So we're gonna be looking at a guy that's run a 3-4 before.
Yeah, I think you're gonna want a guy that's run a 3-4, because that's what Arians likes. Like I said, I think if you got a guy like Fangio, and then brought in LeBeau as a special assistant or whatever you want to call him, that's good. And if you just promoted from within, Rapone, and brought in LeBeau as a special assistant, that's just as good, because you have a guy like LeBeau. That all hinges on LeBeau. I think if you don't bring in a LeBeau, I think Fangio is probably going to be a better hire in the immediate. But I think I don't think Rapone or Caldwell are necessarily going to be bad hires. I just think Fangio would be the best hire in the immediate if you weren't going to bring on a LeBeau as well.
Exactly. And now the question is will Caldwell even be around? I don't know for sure. Bruce Arians kind of joked about it that Bowles wouldn't take anyone, but there's been some whispers. We heard Freddie Kitchens' name come up as a potential offensive coordinator. Maybe Mike Caldwell going with him and becoming the defensive coordinator. So yeah, now the Cardinals are officially looking for a defensive coordinator. Arians said he has a plan, so I wonder how long it will take to make that move. Now, the question moving forward is, how do you see that affecting the Cardinals moving forward? How different? I mean, how much do you think the defense will change, even if it's an in-house hire? How much do you think that it'll look? How much different do you think this team will look defensively? Because every coach obviously has their own particular style. Horton had one style, Bowles has another. But if you go with Mike Caldwell, they're going to change a few looks. Obviously, the strength's still going to be the secondary, and then the defensive line with obvious. But I mean, we're going to look. Are we going to see a very different Cardinals defense next season?
Well, I think we saw a very different Cardinals defense even from year 1 to year 2 of Bowles, and then, we saw him. We saw the heights that it can go to. Sorry, and without the talent, how fast it's going to fall. And I think without knowing Rapone and Caldwell's game, I think we're going to see the opposite of that, where you're going to see it's going to be kind of a learning curve if you're battling the same injury, suspension, old, young type things on the front side and inconsistencies in the back end. So I think Bowles covered up a lot of issues that the Cardinals had, but now you're looking at it where it's going to be kind of fresh eyes and it'll be a new idea that kind of looks the same, but it's gonna function differently.
So obviously this is kind of a W. Let's kind of move on a little bit and look at some of the players. This is really exciting for the Jets. It's really exciting for the Jets. It's really exciting. And Bowles himself has texted in the job. Mike Garofalo's tweet is clearly intrigued with the young talent that they have on defense. And, well, this I did not know. He's from Jersey, so he's going back home. So I guess it makes a lot of sense. He's got a defense he can do a lot with. And it'll be a challenge. So congrats. I miss you. And the Cardinals. All right. Sorry for that drop. If you were listening to me live, I am sorry. The Blog Talk Radio interface just kind of kicked me off there. I don't know if it was inside on my internet or what, but we're back on. We're going to talk. Maybe it was a sign that we're not supposed to talk about the Larry Fitzgerald contract. We were just talking about the salary cap issues that the Arizona Cardinals will be having. They've got some big contracts to deal with, Larry Fitzgerald being the biggest one of them, $23.6 million salary cap hit due in 2015. Either way, whatever happens, if they end up cutting ties with him, they've got till March 17th, I believe, when he's got an $8 million roster bonus due. And then that, if they avoid that, they can save about $9 million in the cap. It'll still would be about $14.2 million on the books for the salary cap. So that isn't exactly the best thing you want to do. And well, what are we going to do about Larry Fitzgerald? That kind of the big thing here is, well, do you cut him? Do you trade him to renegotiate? We've heard kind of both sides. What's your gut feeling right now? Will Fitz be back or not?
I think he's gone. Only because I think Fitz, the player, is not happy. And so if he's going to take a pay cut, I think he'll want, not a pay cut, but I don't know if they've even offered to restructure that monstrosity. But I think they'd want, he'd want more touches. And, I mean, just realistically, that's not going to happen, in Arians' offense. So I think it's going to be a harsh parting. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I hope I'm wrong, but I just, with his family in the media, I don't think it's going to be as clean as it could have been or should have been.
And I was real optimistic until this evening when I saw the interview that he had on one of the NFL things. He's making the media rounds because of one of his promoters. And the question was, what's the likelihood? He said, I don't know. However, kind of the thing that he says is, it's been a great run here. He was talking past tense. And it was the way he said it. It just kind of made you think that he's really wondering this. Does he want to take the pay cut? He hopes he can work something out. Now, the one thing on his side, Michael Bidwell doesn't want him to go, and Michael Bidwell just is sick at the thought of seeing Larry Fitzgerald playing another jersey. So it may come down that they pay him more than they should to keep him around because of who he is. Now, the question is this: how much should they pay him? I mean, he's due to make, I think $16 million in actual money, the $8 million bonus. And then I think it's $8 million, which is his salary. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot, especially for a guy that got, 63 catches under 800 yards. Now, in fairness, he was on pace until Carson went down, and then he went down with the injury. He was on pace for about on can't even think of it, on track to get to about 80 catches, 1,100 yards. Perfectly respectable. You can keep a guy around like that. So, how much is he worth? He's gonna want. I mean, Adrian Wilson, Mike Jurecki talked about the endorsement part, so he's probably making above. Adrian Will said the number was thrown out 3-4 million. He said, "Oh, it's way more than that." He'd be losing if he goes well. He's probably losing $3-4 million in endorsements. So if he stays around for $10 million, they give him $5 million up front. They give him a $5 million salary this year, or even they bump it. They give him his $8 million, and then completely redo the deal for another $2 million salary with $8 million due the next year, and then his salary hit becomes $6 million, something like that. With his salary cap hits is $6 million, with $2 million in the 2 years going across, and then you kind of see what happens. It would be nice to see him around, but the interesting thing I just kind of want to ask is, now, yes, you can find a guy who can replace his production. Obviously, he's not thrilled with the way he's being used. He still wants to be an outside receiver. I still think he would match up great in New England, and it'd be scary with a hit with a Gronk and a Fitz in that offense. And so I think he kind of is mulling around those things, and I hope they hammer things out. But the Cardinals are still in the mind frame that they have a championship window. Do you think, and I'm going to say I think for this particular championship window, they need Larry Fitzgerald. More than just they need the player Larry Fitzgerald. They need Larry Fitzgerald in that locker room if they really want to be serious about being a championship contender based on the personnel they have on offense. Because outside of him, who do they have with any sort of playoff experience? Carson Palmer certainly doesn't have it. I mean, he's well respected. He's definitely a leader, but he doesn't have the playoff experience. You've got Lyle Sendlein. And yeah, that's about it. Do you think they need Larry Fitzgerald in this championship when we're really going to compete next year?
No, I think, that's hard to tell, because the offense was really stagnant without him for 2 games, but that was also a Drew Stanton-led offense, so it's kind of a coin flip of what impacted what more. I think they're built to be okay with his contract, but without making many improvements. I mean, if you hang on to him this year and you kind of get through this year's albatross and you kind of ride on into the sunset with the last couple years, you could see, kind of the weight being lifted off that. But again, I think something has to give, and I don't think either thing's going to give. So when it comes down to it, I think Sendlein will probably be gone as well. And honestly, I think Dockett's gone too. What I don't know. Do you think Dockett's gone?
Certainly, because he's, like we saw with Ray, be an impact player in that two-gap system. And he won't be thrilled. I mean, he wasn't happy when Horton was here. The thing that LeBeau or Horton, it's all the more reason to say that we're looking at goodbye. That, let me tell you that. Perspective, it happens. But if you say goodbye to Lyle, Sendlein, Larry Fitzgerald, and Darnell, Dockett in the same offseason, you're going to be looking at, I think there'll be a different tone in that lot of players. And for the organization to say goodbye all three, to me, potentially be a red flag.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to lose a lot of veteran leadership in that instance if you lose even like a Fitz and a Dockett and keep Sendlein, you're still losing a ton of, or even if you keep a Fitz and you lose Sendlein and Dockett, I mean you're losing veterans both places. I honestly think the success of the team without Dockett this year makes him expendable. I think the idea of moving on from Sendlein is easier said than done, just because an offensive line was, not great this year. I mean, I even wrote about it today, but he's still a veteran presence, especially when Jonathan Cooper starts playing. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So, it's one of those interesting things that you're going to have to really focus on and follow closely. But I mean, yeah, it could be a completely new era here in Arizona, and you're talking about no Larry Fitzgerald, who's kind of been the face of the franchise for a decade, and no Darnell, Dockett, who's kind of been the heart and soul of a defense that's had some ups and downs, but their highs have been really high, and now you could possibly be losing both of them in one off season. That almost, and it's not, but it almost seems like kind of that same old Cardinals thing. It's not, because they're not as talented. I think it's still, but it's just kind of one of those things.
And no, I agree. It's definitely not. But from the outside, when you see on our player, myself, when we talked about this, what was it? In the last offseason, was leading up the year, we were talking about Kurt Warner joining the Ring of Honor. If you look throughout the stands, if you were to make a count, if you were to kind of survey and count up all the number 11, number 90 jerseys throughout the stadium compared to what the rest of the Cardinals jersey, I wouldn't be surprised if over half of the jerseys that are being worn in that stadium are number 11 and number 90. That would be really tough. They need to keep one, and I think somehow they need to make it work for Larry Fitzgerald somehow. Because the Darnell, Dockett, we saw that he was very expendable. I mean, in less playing time, outperformed what Dockett did the previous year, and came against his big progression came against rookies, and a couple of those against undrafted rookies. They're doing exactly what he's supposed to do. So, yeah, the Lyle Sendlein thing is interesting, because he's kind of the leader of that offense. I think they leader. I think that the most expendable of those, it perhaps might be Sendlein, not because he wasn't great. you got a couple of Ted Larson still under contract where he can play center, and he did it ably. He won one of two ways. If the Cardinals like, and I've heard that they like Anthony Steen, if that's from a couple of sources that they really like what Steen. That's a guy potentially because he can play guard, he can play center. He was a natural center heading into college, and so you could either go young, or if he's not ready, you could either move Larson over to center, whether it's Watford or whether it's Anthony Steen. They've got a group of young between Watford and Steen. They got some young talent there on the interior line. They could, if Steen really has come, if they want to use him at center, which he's listed both at guard and center, is a very inexpensive, solid option because when it comes on to play, I don't know if he's more expensive than Doc. I think they're both equally expendable. But I was just thinking about this a championship window, and I really believe that. I don't think they can do that without Larry. Warts and all, I just don't think that they can do that or be really serious about having a championship team that doesn't include Larry Fitzgerald. Maybe that's just me having. And I understand the Fitzgerald situation. I understand the production's not there. His money is, and I know Larry. Larry is a very rich businessman, is about being paid, and he should be. Get as much money as he can. He's paid a lot of money, but with as much optimism, looking at this next season as you would if you had some of that leadership.
You there, Jess? I don't know if we lost Jess again. If this is still working, this is Revenge of the Birds Radio with Jess Root having some technical difficulties, or maybe it's me, it's Seth Cox. But
I can hear you, Seth, if you can hear me.
Okay, I can hear you now.
I don't know what is going on. I'm sorry, fans. I'm sorry. We did start an hour earlier during Blog Talk Radio's more prime the prime listening time. So maybe it's just the fact that normally when we go on an hour later, there just isn't nearly as much issue on the bandwidth. I was just saying again, Seth, that especially if you're saying goodbye to a couple players, Sendlein, Dockett have to be if you can't get rid of all three. I don't think it looks good for the organization. I don't think it would feel good in the locker room. It would take some of that goodwill back up into the locker room that the team. I really think the Cardinals need Larry Fitzgerald every bit as the player as the person. If they both, at least this next season.
Yeah, and well, let me ask you this. You might have said this in the times you're kind of cutting in and out, but what is the savings if they cut a Dockett and a Sendlein? I mean, what kind of savings does that provide them?
Now Dockett will give them a savings. So just on him, he would have Dockett's contract will be $3 million of dead money. It would save the $6.8 million against the cap for Dockett, and Sendlein is due a almost $4.3 million against the cap, and dead money of 1.1. So you'd be saving another 3.1. So 6.8, 3.1. You're not savings then.
So yeah, I mean, almost $10 million for two guys. I think that's a good start, because then I'm pretty sure they're under the cap as constructed, are they not? Or they're right near it?
I think so, especially once it goes, because it's going to go back to the top 15 season, so it won't be crucial. And they're not the only ones. I mean, there's also Calais Campbell's contract that you might consider looking at as well as, not that they're going to cut him, but because his cap hit, let me pull that up right now, his cap hit for 2015 is holy bananas. Again, I am sorry, technical difficulties. Seth, are you still there?
I am here.
Well, at what point did I die out there? I was going on a rant about.
I heard you about Calais, and that's about the time you went on.
Okay.
Calais'
contract
2015, yeah,
will have to be addressed. Now, they're not going to cut him, but they will do a restructure. I don't think there's going to be any issue. They're going to restructure his deal some way. Then you've got Calais, you got Fitz, you got Dockett, you got Sendlein. And then I was just going to point out, we should talk about who are some of the players that, because every year there are player cuts, whether it's performance or simply numbers. They're not the big numbers. And I was just saying how, well, there's one screaming at us in Ted Ginn, who has a $4 million cap hit the year entering 2015. They'd save $2.5 million against the cap. There's no way in the world. Is there a scenario in this world where Ted Ginn would be on this team in 2015?
I really hope not. I mean, I can't say there isn't, but it's hard to see one. Another interesting one is if they do like Watford and Steen, like you talked about earlier. Larson's another interesting one, and it's not because of performance, but numbers. If you can have Paul Fenica as your backup guard, and you start you draft another guard or center, and you start a Watford Steen somewhere, or even start Fenica again, which nobody wants to see, but I mean, it's not like they haven't been doing it for 2 years, and cut Larson. At least, that's another, I think it's like almost three that they're saving there too. So there's some interesting, like you said, there's some interesting cuts there that they can make. I'm trying to think.
Larson's deal isn't that big a savings. In fact, that's kind of the reason why I think he'll still be around. His cap hit for next year is $1.5 million.
Is it down to that much? Okay.
Yeah, it was. He signed it was a 2-year, $2.6 million deal.
Okay. So,
yeah, I mean, they will save because dead money. I mean, it's only $235,000. So if they cut him, they're saving over $1 million, and with almost no dead money. But being that the more veteran player, BA really, and Keim liked him too. I know the production wasn't there overall, at least from our point of view. We'll say that from our point of view, it wasn't as good as what we had hoped. But that's where I think his veteran presence would be a better option, perhaps at center, maybe a guard to, whether it was Steen, whether it was Larson that played at center. I don't think they're going to completely gut every veteran on that group and leave him just with Valdir.
Yeah. The other one I think, and this is just, it could happen if something happens before, is if they are able to re-sign Cromartie for, maybe like a 2-year, $12 or $15 million deal, which I don't think Cromartie takes. I think he's going to want to go get 3 years at, $27 million, which somebody's going to offer him. But anyways, I think you could look at Powers as a guy, even though he was really good last year, with Matthew and Bethel stepping up, and he's a free agent after 2015, to get 1 year off the books if you were to sign Cromartie. I don't think you can even possibly think about it if you don't re-sign Cromartie. I mean, even if they were to say, and this is hypothetical, but draft a guy at 24 to play corner, I don't think you can cut Powers still. I think you have to have somebody in there you have to have somebody opposite Peterson who has some experience. And Powers was really good last year, but like you said, it's a numbers game sometimes too.
And his number is not cheap. His cap number is $5.25 million. That's
I think it's like $4 million they get off the books. It's like $1 million dead or something
yes.
like that.
It'd be $1 million dead, $4.25 in savings. And I know he played really well in the slot. The issue is, other than obvious, Tyrann Mathieu didn't play in the slot this year. Tyrann Mathieu didn't have that great a year. Yes, he was coming back for an injuries, but part of why he didn't have that great a year? He didn't play in the slot, which is where the Cardinals really liked him his rookie year. And I think they saw him long-term as being that sort of hybrid player that plays safety on some downs and slot nickel corner on passing downs. In this past season, because of the play of Powers and because of Tyrann's injury, he didn't even play base. So it was Tony Jefferson in base and Tyrann playing safety in nickel, which means he was not on the field as much, which he wasn't making the same impact, and he wasn't playing the same position. So I think that's another reason why you think Powers might be on the chopping block, but at the same time, with Cromartie walking, you can't just let Powers go as well, because then you're left with just either having to pick someone else up in free agency, and that's not always the best way to go. Drafting a guy or hoping Bethel can make the next jump. They keep talking about it, but I think he's probably still at least another season away.
Yeah, and I think that's what I said. If you re-sign Cromartie, you can make that move, because if you look at it like that, where you go Powers, Dockett, and Sendlein, you're talking $15 million almost right there. That's a huge number. All of a sudden, that's opened up. So. And say you use, like I said, maybe you can get Crow for 6 or 7, and then you still have, almost 10 to play with. That's a good number to be at for the Cardinals, because you have to remember, when you are a team that's close like the Cardinals are, a lot of the times you don't have cap space, and the Seahawks had cap space because Russell Wilson hasn't gotten paid yet.
And
the Broncos had cap space because Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas and Ryan Clady all haven't been paid yet. Well, all those guys are all coming due next year, or this year, sorry. So that's all going to be ending now. So they're all going to be in the same boat the Cardinals are, where, you try to make moves in, with $20 million in salary cap space, and it's usually the bad teams that have a ton of money. Somehow the Broncos still have a ton of money. I have no idea how.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, they're playing with monopoly money or something. They just or maybe they're just geniuses. I don't know. But yeah, another kind of think tank look at the players. Let's look at the Daryl Washington situation, and we're really. Could you imagine this scenario? And it's really not Daryl Washington returning to the Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald and Darnell Dockett not returning to the Cardinals. Bruce Arians hinted that he wants. Daryl, a football player, he wants back on the field, and it showed, especially late in the season. Oh, they needed Daryl Washington a lot. There's some definite hoops here. He has to get reinstated first, so he's got to get past the first year. So he's got to come up on, I think it was March, at the end of March when that suspension came down. He's got to clear at least a year. He's got to be reinstated. After he's reinstated, he's going to be dealing with suspension for his domestic violence. Adrian Wilson suggests a redone deal, which kind of makes sense, but that would make him coming back a little bit easier. But at the same time, what do you do with Daryl Washington, assuming he gets reinstated? Do you cut ties with them at that point? Do you try to get the money back, or do you let's redo the deal? You'll still get all your original money, but we're going to push it further back. So you can prove
Yeah,
to us.
I think that's what you kind of have to do with him at this point, because you can't just allow him to come back and act like, oh, hey, you're back, welcome back, nothing happened. Like, you can't just do that. But I don't think from a standpoint of talent, the Cardinals have the talent to allow him to walk, because Kevin Minter hasn't worked out. I think if the Cardinals had their druthers, they let him walk and just move on and kind of clean their hands of the situation. But the fact that, Minter hasn't worked out, Foot has, obviously, is 100 years old and played like it at the end of the season. You can't just go into the season with a new defensive coordinator and your inside linebackers being Larry Foote and Kevin Minter again. I mean, that was really, really awful. And so I think you end up having to bite the bullet, say, he's rehabilitated himself from the standpoint of drugs, hopefully, and he's rehabilitated himself from the standpoint of the domestic violence issue, which he'll probably get a 6-game suspension as well. And after 6 games, we're going to welcome him back and be the, hopefully the place where he can come to take out his anger issues.
Yeah, and I don't know. He's just been on the field is when it really kind of interesting. The thing that I fear is they're going to be put there. The Cardinals have kind of painted themselves into a corner of how they reacted to the Jonathan Dwyer situation. They quickly ran up. Granted, he was a BA guy, and they felt bad for him. I mean, as a person, because they didn't know him to be that way. But the organization, they ran away from Jonathan Dwyer. I mean, when the Daryl Washington team came, but now that case is going to come back up. They're going to, if they don't run away as an organization, saying no, we're not going to stand for this, because the comments about Jonathan Dwyer is, if he's cleared, we'll welcome him back to the organization. Daryl Washington is a guilty plea. Talent always trumps headaches, but the perception, at least there will be a chunk of fans that will be very unhappy with the team bringing back Washington because of what he did.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, and I know you feel similarly based just off our talks, but I'm kind of in that boat where I would have rather them already cut bait. So unless they are trying to recoup money in some way and it just can't happen yet for some reason, and I mean, and you and I don't know all the ins and outs of, the legalities of what the Cardinals can and can't do to recoup that money. But if that's the only reason he's on the roster, okay, I'm fine with that. But at this point, you've already kind of made your bed. So, you may as well lay in it, because this is where you're at. Now, again, if they're only keeping him on the roster to eventually cut him so they can get their money back, then that's a completely different scenario than if they're just keeping him on the roster because they were going to, hope that this whole thing blew over and, oh, hey, look, he's back from his drug suspension. Don't pay attention to the next 6 games when he's not out there, because, don't remember what he did to get that suspension either.
And okay, seriously, we're having some issues again. Seth, where did I cut off?
I don't know. I've been talking, so I have no idea. I just kind of picked up after you dropped off and just talked about Washington, and I think you and I were of the opinion that they needed to just cut bait with this guy and kind of eat the contract. But if they're trying to recoup this money, then I think I'm okay with him being on the roster. But in the end, if they're just going to keep him, then I mean, you have to play him because he's your best player. So if you're just going to keep him on the roster, then play him. At least get something out of him because you've already kind of made a mockery of it if you're going to keep him on the roster and cut Jonathan Dwyer or make Jonathan Dwyer inactive right away.
Moving forward, talking to kind of close things up, we're going to look at the free agents that the Cardinals have and which of these players Cardinals should bring back, if any of them. You got Rob Hauser at tight end. You got Paul Fenica guard, John Abraham linebacker, Dan Williams at nose tackle, defensive lineman Tommy Kelly, linebacker Sam Acho, linebacker Larry Foote, Marcus Bernard, cornerback Antonio Cromartie, long snapper Mike Leach, and then they got 3 restricted free agents in Bradley Sowell, Ryan Lindley, and Alameda Tiamu. If you're looking at that list, are there any guys on that list you say you got to bring them back? I think you and I both agree, if it's possible, money-wise, Antonio Cromartie makes life so much easier for the Cardinals, for whoever their defensive coordinator is going to be now. Maybe that becomes a little less important because of how they scheme things in the back end. Obviously, if they're flexible enough, they can just let Cromartie and Peterson run in man coverage like they did this year. But maybe that's not the way to go. But at least looking at things right now, Antonio Cromartie is kind of the priority to me if you can make that work.
Yeah, I think Crow's the priority. I think 2 on my list would be Dan Williams, but you have to be careful how much you're paying for a guy that's only going to play 30 to 40% of the snaps. From there, I think it's all just, what you get for cheap. Tommy Kelly, okay, I'll take him back. Larry Foote, I'll have him on the roster for depth if, to be kind of the depth behind mentor if Daryl Washington is back, or to mentor another young linebacker named Paul Dawson that I hope they draft from TCU. Hopefully he's not the same kind of knucklehead.
They do have the same issues at the school. I mean,
yeah. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, really, from there, here's what I'll say. And this is one thing that I forgot to bring up during the cut segment. I would cut John Carlson and re-sign Rob Hauser for less money because I think you can get Rob Hauser for less money, and he's better than John Carlson. And I think we saw that this year.
That's the player that we didn't bring up before as a guy to cut. John Carlson, I think, disappointing beyond, especially the way BA talked him up, the way Carson Palmer talked to him. I don't have a problem bringing Rob Hauser back. Rob Hauser as a number 2 or a number 3 tight end is not a bad tight end at all.
No, I just think when you dropped him in the 3rd round and he was built up as, I think everybody wanted him to be Luke Wilson, like the guy, in Seattle.
I tweeted
not.
on Sunday and you texted me that you had just told your wife.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we all expected Hauser to become, and he didn't. So we just have to move on from the expectations and just face the reality that he's a number, he's a low-end number 2, a really high-end number 3, and that's a good thing to have. Especially if you're going to go into the season with Fales and Nicholas as your 1 and 2 in some capacity. But yeah, I think Hauser would be my if again kind of like Powers. If you sign Cromartie, cut Powers. If you can re-sign Hauser, then cut Carlson type thing.
And I look at Dan Williams as I think he'll probably be priced out of what the Cardinals are willing to pay. Unfortunately, Alameda Tiamu sort of fell off. I don't know what happened to him. He was so good in 2013. It was absurd how good he was. Something happened. He was healthy and he was down the stretch. We both looked at Tiamu as the guy who would make Dan Williams expendable. Dan Williams is going to be because Dan Williams is really good at what he does, and I don't think there's any way the Cardinals can afford to keep him, especially like you said. how much to pay a guy who's plays 30% of the downs, as important as he is. And Tiago was supposed to be that. He's going to be a restricted free agent. He was undrafted, so they could have had him for another year for on the cheap. I mean, even tendering him at, I think of what, 1.2 million it would have been, even if they gave him a low end, like a same round, which basically 1.2 million. That's a deal. That's a deal, because that's a lot less they're going to pay Dan Williams. Everyone else on that list, I mean, Bradley Sowell, I wouldn't mind seeing back, but I don't care if he's depth. If he's depth, I don't care if he's on the team. He has experience. And John Abraham's probably done. I think Larry Foote is probably done as well. Mike Leach would be great to see him back, although at long snapper, can you afford to pay him more than $1 million again? Maybe that's where if they keep Glenn Carson, that's what he was doing in the offseason as the backup long snapper. I don't know, but they liked what they saw the Carson. I think it was more than just the long snapper. After that, I'm really okay with those. I'd like to see Tommy Kelly wouldn't be bad. Sam Acho's not a bad guy to bring back at on the cheap, because he's a good depth linebacker. I mean, he gives you good special teams. He gets you good depth. There's some things he does well. He plays pretty well in coverage. He can play pretty well against the run. But if you're looking for an impact player, no, that he's not the guy in the pass rush. But he's an okay. I wouldn't mind him coming back as well.
Asha's an interesting one in terms of, I don't know, what do you pay him? He's kind of like Hauser for me. Like, if you get those guys at the right cost, I'm fine with it. But if you pay them in that, like, tier of money where it's like almost that, who's the guy we talked about earlier? Jeez, Ted Larson tier. Like, if you go up into that range of money for those guys where you're talking, 2 years, like $3 million, I think that's too much for either of those guys, because I think what they bring is so replaceable that it won't matter. But like you said, like if you can get Sam Acho at the right price, then I'm fine with that. But here's my question: how much different is Acho than like Bernard in terms of special teams production? Because I feel like if you can get Marcus Bernard for less than Sam Acho, and you're going to kind of phase Acho, the theory of phasing Acho out of the defense, then I would rather bring back Bernard if you're talking just money's involved.
You're right. And Bernard offers you a lot more, at least in pass rushing ability, because that's kind of what his niche was. He could get to the passer. The one other thing, I mean, the one thing that you have to look at least for those two players, is locker room effect. Sam is one of those locker room guys. Bernard, I didn't see enough of in my time in the locker room to know that he really, and I'm sure that's in part because he wasn't with the team for a good chunk of the season. So Acho is part of the heart of that team. Not to say that's too important, but that might be one way you go additionally because of where he fits. He's a good glue guy in the locker room. He's always happy. He gets along with everyone, and he'll give you some level of production. Again, yeah, price. It will come down to price in the end.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We lose you again, Jess? I think we lost Jess again. Sorry about this tonight, folks. One of those nights when you use the internet to do your podcast, these things happen. I think, and to go back to the beginning of the show and Todd Bowles, it looks like Caldwell from the Cardinals coaching staff is in line to be the DC of the Jets. The Cardinals have veto power on that, so we'll see if that happens. That's per Mike Jurecki. And it sounds like Chan Gailey is going to be the offensive coordinator in New York. So interesting staff Bowles put together, very low-key staff. Definitely a departure from the Ryan circus that was there last. As far as the Cardinals go, I think in the end what you're going to see in this key of the offseason is Fitz will kind of be the big domino, and after that everything else is going to fall into place. But he's the guy that kind of sets everything up with his giant cap number. If the Cardinals can work something out, which I know they would like to, they will. If they can't, then you're going to see a very different face of the franchise for the Cardinals. And offensively, I think replacing Fitz is going to be more difficult than people understand at this point, because even like a guy like Mike Wallace, who I heard on the Burns and Gambo show, they talked about the other day maybe Mike Wallace getting cut and coming back to BA. He's not the receiver that Fitz is at this stage in his career. So you're talking about apples and oranges there. Maybe Floyd makes that jump that we've been waiting for him to make, and we'll see a guy in Floyd to make that jump and make that transition from Fitz easier. But Fitz is the big domino. After that, we'll find out. I mean, what are their plans with Dockett? What are their plans with Sendlein? How many veterans, big salary veterans, can they afford to cut in one off season before they move on and kind of change direction? And from that, I think it's an interesting follow this off season. Jess might be back on tonight. I'm not sure. Trying to get things figured out on his end. So if this is still recording, I hope you guys have a good night. We'll be back in probably a couple weeks. Free agency primer starts March 15th, I believe. We'll probably do a show the week before, or the Tuesday before, maybe the 13th, and do a show. And any big news that comes out, maybe when they hire a DC or start their cuts, we'll have a show on to kind of discuss what's going on with those moves. But again, this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. Just Root is having technical difficulties. I'm Seth Cox. We appreciate you listening, and have a good night, everybody.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/Revenge of the Birds.